Hi everyone, this is a podcast for D811 students, and this podcast is focused on developing your project focus. So D811 is the second of the two modules in your MSc Psychology conversion, and clearly this module is a big kind of the spine of this module, if you like, is the project work. It kind of fits alongside other content, and you're working your way through, consolidating your understanding of the research methods bits you did in the first module last year with this module, and then you're also developing your project work. So it feels useful just to kind of, I think that's, there's a lot of excitement with that because it's great because you get to do your own project work. You get to think about the area in psychology that you're interested in, that excites you, and the theories, the evidence you're interested in. There's a lot of you that comes into this, which is brilliant. That's how it should be. It should be the end of any course of study, should be some kind of piece of work where you are centre stage, in a sense. Your interests, the things that really kind of motivate you and strike you as important as a thinker and a learner and a researcher, can come through in this project work. So this podcast is intended to, I guess, do a few things. It's intended to look at what sort of factors are going to be relevant to thinking about what to do for your project. So it's very exciting, but there are also some uncertainties about what to focus on, which methods to use, what the time scale is, all these kinds of things. And we'll think about that in loads of detail as we go forward. But this podcast is really just a start to think about the factors that will help shape how you kind of start refining your focus for your project. It will also provide some coverage on methods, so thinking about what methods you might want to focus on for your project work. And I'll spend a little bit in a third sort of section of this podcast thinking about what sort of things are going to be important, and sort of the role of support and dialogue with me and with each other, and thinking about a time scale, so sort of the climate in which you're working, if you like, to kind of deliver a successful project. Okay, so I think one of the main questions that sort of come up quite rightly, and they come up for me as a learner when I've started doing a course. I sort of think, well, that's fantastic. I can do any project I like. And one thought on from that is, oh, right, okay, that's there's some pressure there. There's some kind of pressure on me to come up with an area for project focus. What on earth will I do? But that's like anything else. I think that's just an opportunity to have some sort of response and sort of think, okay, well, what's going to be deliverable? What's going to be something that I want to do? What's going to be something that gives me a foundation for something I want to talk about in the future, in job interviews, in job applications, in course applications, in my professional life, in my wider life, in my in any sort of sense of kind of forward-looking thinking. So this leads us on to thinking about those factors that will help you, I think, refine your project focus. And I think there are three main factors that have some sort of bearing on what you focus on in your projects. So factor number one is probably the most important, but they're all important. But this is a real kind of rate limiting factor. It's got to be an ethically okay project. It can't be kind of any kind of thing you like. It can't involve any kind of participants. It can't really, I don't think, even involve any kind of scales, because, assuming we're talking about a quantitative project, it's got to have some parameters in that make it an ethically relatively okay project. lower sensitivity project, and that means being careful around what sort of mental health issues are focused on. If that's an area of project work you're interested in, and lots of psychology project students are interested in mental health focused projects, it's got to be something that's lower sensitivity and something that's suited to the period you're in, which is a research apprenticeship. All of your MSc conversion or all of the research methods part you can think of as a research apprenticeship. It's getting you trained up and skilled at this kind of foundational level for being a researcher in the future, for being, and that could mean doing active research, doing a PhD, doing a doctoral course, but it also trains you up to be a really kind of high-level consumer of research, someone who can, read research articles at a really good technical level, partly through having completed your own research at MSc level. But it's got to have a low sensitivity starting point. It's got to obviously be ethically approved. You can't do any project work that hasn't gained ethical approval from me to start with. It's got to tick all the boxes in terms of consent and debrief and anonymity and confidentiality. It's got to not involve deception of any kind. You'll have lots of exposure to ethics already in your studies, and we'll have more of it for this module. But that's one thing to bear in mind as something to kind of adjust what you're planning to do for your project work. What's factor number 2? It's got to be a practical, deliverable project. So even if it's sort of an ethically okay project, it can't be too big in scale. It can't involve too many variables. It can't involve too large a sample of interviewees if you're doing a qualitative project. You've got to be doing a project, designing a project that's kind of deliverable within the relatively short time span of D811. So I suppose D811 starts in September and ends in June. It's a relatively short time span. It does go quickly. We're right at the start of things as I record this, but it's important to think about something that's going to be practical, a pragmatic kind of approach to designing the project is one really important consideration. Sample size, the nature of your sample is a good example of that kind of practical approach. It can't be a sample that's going to be really, really difficult to recruit. If it's 18 to 25-year-old young adults from a very specific group in society, unless you're really confident you have access to that sort of very specific group, it's not going to make a lot of sense to have that as sort of part of your sampling approach, because it's just going to hinder that recruitment period, and all of the periods of the project work are going to be a bit time limited. So having something that's going to be practical in that respect is really important. Now, just two other things to mention there while I think of it. There's that old kind of quote of or that old saying of less is more. I think that really does apply to the project work, and you might think back to your dissertation work you did for your undergraduate degrees here and have some reflections of your own there. But less is definitely more with the psychology dissertation project work. Having that idea, but then possibly scaling it down to something ethically appropriate and practically deliverable, and thinking about the expanded, bigger, more ambitious, possibly more ethically demanding version of that project that you could do as a PhD project, that you could add and some narrative around as a future research suggestion in the discussion section of your final project report. So all of those bigger scale ideas, looking at your project work to apply to a clinical sample perhaps, all of those bigger scale ideas will find a home somewhere in your final project report write-up as a future research suggestion at the very least. Right, I think that was all I was going to say there about the 3 factors. No, I haven't had the 3rd factor yet. The 3rd factor, really important. We've already sort of touched on it. So we've had ethics, having a practical project, a practical deliverable project. What's the 3rd one? It's got to be a project that motivates you. It's got to be something you care about. I'm very happy to suggest loose project ideas, but there's no good you accepting them if it's something that isn't going to kind of appeal to you and motivate you all the way through those stages, because ultimately you're going to be doing all the work, writing up the project proposal form and the ethics form, collecting the sample, doing the analyses, writing the report, writing all of the project-related pieces of assessment for D811. So it's got to be something you care about and something that is going to be kind of something that keeps you motivated during those, rainy afternoons in early March. Something that just keeps you coming back because you really care about the focus of the project. One thing that occurs to me there to mention, which is links to kind of having a project that motivates you, I think, something that comes back sometimes is this idea that, tutors say no and close down lots of project areas. I've never met a tutor who's really very like that. I think tutors want to strike a balance between something that's going to be deliverable and something that's going to motivate you through the duration of the project work. And what I'd say is that there'll always be a project that's going to motivate you. It might not be that initial project you think of and you post about on the project forum, but there will be a way in which you and I reach, each of us in our pairs, in our supervisory pairs, there'll be a project that's going to work well ethically, practically, and motivation-wise. So it might not be that you can, measure that particular variable that's a little bit ethically high sensitive, but there might be a very similar variable that does something equivalent that works in a different kind of way, that's ethically okay, and delivers the project topic area focus and involves the methods that are going to motivate you for the duration of the project. Okay, so that's sort of the first thing, sort of the factors that help shape and define what you're interested in. Now, I'm going to appeal to you here to consider pausing this podcast and going over, if you haven't already, to the project forum on the splashdown page you get to when you go to your OU profile bit of the website. Go to the project forum. I can't start conversation there, but you can. Put a post in there with even an outline of your project plans. If it's even something as simple as, diet and well-being or attitudes towards recycling, put that in the project forum and our conversation can start from there. It is going to involve a bit of discussion and dialogue, but I think you'll be surprised and also a bit relieved with how quickly a project can come together that's ethical, that's practical in focus, and that's going to be something you're interested in, something that motivates you. So do consider doing that now before listening any further to this podcast. Okay, we'll move on from that, and we've already touched on methods, but let's focus a bit more explicitly on methods for this module for D811. So you are sort of almost spoilt for choice with the methods you can use for D811. I'm used to tutoring mainly on DE300, which is a very similar module. It's the undergraduate psychology project module. And we do a specific track there. For some reason, students come to the end of that module, and through whatever pathway of modules they've done, they are mainly required to do one particular methods track, whether survey or qualitative or experimental. For you guys, it's open to your choice, and that's fantastic. You can choose the methods track that's going to work best for you for the current time. And that might link to all sorts of things. Your previous kind of familiarity with a particular method from your last course of studies, the kinds of methods that have fired you up and that you're excited about during your psychology conversion MSc studies. You might be thinking about the kind of methods you want to learn more about and focus on for this particular project work. Perhaps linked to what you want to do after this MSc. You want to have some methods that you've gained a particular standard in for this project work that you then go on to have something to talk about in interviews and application forms following your conversion course studies. I think you can afford to be a bit tactical about which methods you want to do. Another thing might be that you really found one of the methods very difficult. You found SPSS very difficult, or thematic analysis. It wasn't for you. Something about it felt didn't connect with you. It wasn't so straightforward to do. Now that could take you in either direction. You might want to spend more time with it now and work on it, but it might be a reason for thinking, actually, I'm not going to carry on and do that for my project. I'm going to choose that other method, which I really like the sound of, and I'm going to have a deep dive with that in a topic area I'm interested in, and that's going to be the methods focus for my project work on D811. So have a think about being a bit strategic with methods there, with which method you choose. I'm going to give you an example there from my own background. So I did a psychology conversion course at Southbank University. I was okay at both quantitative and qualitative methods, but I got a better mark for my qualitative report in my research methods module before I did the dissertation. And one side of me was thinking, right, okay, I should probably do a qualitative dissertation. But the other side of me was thinking, actually, I probably want to do something else after this. After I finish this course, I want to do a master's course maybe. I'm going to work up my understanding of quantitative methods. I've done it, to a good standard in the research methods course, but I wanted to build on that. I wanted to really kind of focus on one analytic technique, really, get to grips with data collection, and make that my focus. So I actually ended up doing a survey project and multiple regression for my conversion course dissertation 16 years ago, and I don't regret it at all. It was a really, I'm really glad that I made that decision. But it could have worked very well the other way as well. But I'm just presenting that as an example from my life, and that's me, and that's my course of decisions. You're going to have your own ideas. You're going to have your own thinking about what works best for you and your learning approach, methods-wise for this project, for you right now. Only you're going to know that. So have a think about being a bit strategic there. What methods do you want to use for this project? What will draw well on your strengths now? What strengths and skills and abilities do you want to focus on now? What sort of stuff do you want to have to be able to talk about in applications and interviews in a year's time, in 18 months' time? What will you find the most personally enriching methods-wise? I think it's as important as topic areas, if not arguably more important. The methods are a big deal. Let's funnel in a bit more there about methods. Now, people use the word methods as a sort of catch-all thing. But methods really refers to two different things. Methods refers to lots of things, I suppose, but there are two things it definitely refers to. It's sort of shorthand for data collection methods on the one hand, and methods of data analysis on the other hand. So an example of methods of data collection for a qualitative project might be interviews, semi-structured interviews, might be focus groups. It might be looking at blog post entries or diary entries or something. but it's probably going to be a data collection method that generates textual data that you then subject to some kind of analysis. Data collection methods for quantitative studies are probably going to be through the form of a survey, a questionnaire included on a survey, scales embedded in that survey that generate numerical data. And you're going to be using those numbers, putting them in SPSS and running some sort of analysis on them. So I would say surveys are kind of the main data collection approach of a quantitative research project. And then if we look at forms of data analysis and methods of data analysis, for qualitative projects that might involve something like a thematic analysis, which could involve very different kinds of approach to data ultimately, but thematic analysis is sort of a family of different methods of qualitative analysis. It might involve looking at lived experience, so kind of a phenomenological kind of piece of work. It might involve looking at the role of language, how people use language in particular ways to perform particular functions, subject positions and this kind of thing. So it might be a discursive analysis. And this would all be possibly based on textual data. So we get a sense there of the different forms of kind of qualitative data analysis. For quantitative analysis, again, this opens up those two main different arms of the survey approach or the experimental approach. And I won't go into loads of detail about that because the phrasing, the names, gets all quite technical. But broadly speaking, you'd be looking at comparing differences between groups if you're doing an experimental project, or if you're using something like multiple regression, then you're doing something like looking at the relationship between different variables, looking at statistically significant relationships between groups of three or more variables. So there's methods of data collection, methods of data analysis, but it comes back to that thing we were talking about a moment ago, which is choose the one you care about the most. Choose the methods that you want to use for your project, for this project now. Okay, final bit of this podcast. I think a really important bit of developing or thinking about developing your project approach is this idea that involves dialogue and that it's going to sort of take place over a particular time scale. So no one is expecting you at all to come up with a project plan right now. It's going to take a while, and you're not going to be alone with this. It's going to take some dialogue with me as your tutor, talking on the project forum, talking with each other in different supervision group sessions and different learning events. There's going to be lots of opportunities to have dialogue and to get feedback on, your different ideas. All of these environments are going to be safe spaces for talking about these things. There's no a setup where people are expected to have answers or expected to have final perfect questions. This is the whole idea. We're here to think about what things like research questions mean and what things like project titles mean and what's going to be the important elements to include there. So just encourage you there to sort of have that idea of the whole process of developing a research focus is going to happen kind of steadily over a period of time. And it's going to be something that you do in collaboration with me and in collaboration with each other to some extent as you learn each other's ideas and gradually refine what it is that you want to focus on. The first time, just looking at the supervision timetable document that you'll have seen by now, because I'll have shared it by the time you're listening to this. You won't need to submit the first time you sort of submit something which gives a bit of a sense of your project really is the literature review in the first week of January 2025. And that's going to be the first time when you're giving a sense at the end of that review what the title is of your of your project. So I think that's the first time you're starting to kind of nail down a bit more what it is you'll be focusing on. And obviously you'll be working towards that throughout the course of December. But I think really you're going to be refining your project focus throughout the autumn. It's going to take a little while. And it might come together more quickly for some people than others, but it's by no means a race. It's about figuring out what's going to be an ethically appropriate project, what's going to be a practical project, and what's going to kind of keep you motivated throughout. That's hopefully enough information for now about the projects, but please email me with any questions about your project focus. Please post up on the project forum as soon as you can, really, or whenever you like in the next month, I'd say. A very loose idea about what you're thinking of doing. And I'm very happy if you just want to post on the project forum, Dom, I've got no idea what I want to do for my project. Or, Dom, I'm thinking of doing something like, attitudes towards recycling. That can be enough. And literally all of our ideas, all of the discussion, and your eventual kind of decision over what it is you're going to focus on for your project will come from that process. Okay, I hope that's been useful and look forward to having all these discussions with you. It's a real privilege. It's fantastic to see these projects develop. They're so different, all of your projects. And it's a real privilege to work with you guys, developing them and seeing what comes together. So I'm really looking forward to that dialogue and process with you, and please get in touch with any questions at this stage about developing the topic area and methods that the topic areas and methods that you're currently thinking about for your D811 project.